The year was 3598, and Admiral Zarachin stood at the observation deck of the Prometheus station, watching the solar harvester arrays dance around the sun like mechanical angels. Each station was a marvel of human engineering, crystalline structures that could withstand temperatures exceeding 6,000 Kelvin while siphoning the star's raw energy and converting it into pure power cells that fueled humanity's greatest achievements. Status report, Commander Hayes, Admiral Chen called without turning from the mesmerizing sight of the solar collectors, their surfaces shimmering with absorbed stellar radiation. Commander Marcus Hayes approached, his footsteps echoing in the vast chamber. All 17 primary stations are operating at optimal efficiency, Admiral. Energy output has increased by 12% since we implemented the new quantum resonance collectors. The inner system defense grid is fully charged, and our weapons platforms have enough stored solar energy to level entire moons. Chen nodded, her reflection ghost-like in the reinforced transparent aluminum viewing port. At 53, she had spent her entire career protecting humanity's most precious resource, the solar energy that powered their civilization's golden age. Cities that floated in the clouds of Venus, terraforming engines that had transformed Mars into a garden world, and the massive space elevators that connected Earth to its orbital rings, all of it depended on the power harvested from Sol itself. And the Pluto situation? She asked, her voice betraying the first hint of concern. Hayes's expression darkened. Our deep space reconnaissance drones have detected significant movement in the outer system. The Orcs clans appear to be mobilizing their entire fleet. Intelligence estimates at least 300 warships have departed Pluto's orbital shipyards in the past week. The Orcs. Humanity had first encountered them during the Great Expansion of 3401, when the colony ship New Horizon had discovered them already established on Pluto and its moons. What followed was not the peaceful first contact that humanity had hoped for, but a tense standoff that had lasted nearly 2 centuries. The Orcs were not the crude barbarians of ancient Earth fantasy. These beings had evolved in the cold reaches of space, their physiology adapted to low gravity and radiation-rich environments. They were brilliant engineers and fierce warriors, having built a sprawling civilization in the outer solar system using asteroid mining and ice harvesting. Their technology was different from humanity's, more organic, grown rather than manufactured, but no less sophisticated. Have they made any formal demands? Chen asked. The same as always. They claim the solar energy belongs to all sapient species in the system. They want joint control of the harvesting stations and equal distribution of power cells. Hayes pulled up a holographic display showing the latest intercepted communications. But their fleet movements suggest they're beyond negotiation. This isn't a diplomatic mission, Admiral. It's an invasion force. Chen turned away from the view of the sun and faced her command staff. The bridge of Prometheus Station was a cathedral of technology, with holographic displays showing every aspect of the solar harvesting operation. Thousands of smaller automated collectors moved in precise orbits, each one worth more than most planetary economies. How long until they reach the inner system? She asked. At current velocity, approximately 18 days. But Admiral, there's something else. Hayes manipulated the display, zooming out to show the entire solar system. They're not coming directly. The fleet has split into 3 groups. One is taking a conventional trajectory toward Mars, but the other 2 are using gravity assists from Jupiter and Saturn. They'll arrive at different times, from different vectors. A coordinated assault. Chen mused. They've learned from our previous encounters. She thought back to the border wars of 3533, when smaller Orcish raiding parties had attempted to capture individual harvesting stations. Those attacks had been repelled, but not without significant losses. They're not just planning to steal our stations. They're planning to hold them. The implications were staggering. Without the solar energy, humanity's expansion would grind to a halt. The terraform engines on Mars would shut down. The orbital cities would fall dark. Earth itself, now dependent on imported power for its 12 billion inhabitants, would face catastrophe. Activate the Heliarch Protocol, Chen ordered. A hush fell over the bridge. The Heliarch Protocol was humanity's most closely guarded secret, a network of hidden weapons platforms powered directly by the sun's core energy. Each one could unleash the equivalent of a solar flare, turned into a focused beam capable of vaporizing entire fleets. "Admiral," Hayes said carefully, "the Heliarch weapons have never been tested in actual combat. The power requirements alone will be met," Chen interrupted. "We've been harvesting solar energy for 2 centuries, Commander. It's time we used it for its intended purpose." She activated her command neural link, sending encrypted orders throughout the inner system. "Alert all civilian traffic to clear the solar shipping lanes. Recall the 3rd and 7th battle groups from the asteroid belt. And send a priority message to Earth Command. The solar war has begun." On the bridge of the Orsish dreadnought Grimfong, War Chief Thok Ironjaw studied the tactical display with satisfaction. The 3-pronged assault was proceeding exactly as planned. The humans had grown complacent in their solar kingdom, believing their energy monopoly made them invincible. Thok was old by Orsish standards, his tusks yellowed with age and his green skin scarred by decades of conflict. He had been born on Pluto during the early settlement years, when the Orcs had first arrived at the edge of the solar system in their generation ships, fleeing some long-forgotten catastrophe in distant stars. War Chief, his aide Gorka Bloodspear, approached with the latest intelligence reports. "The human battle fleets are moving to intercept. They're concentrating their forces around Mars." "As expected," Thok growled. "They think we seek a conventional battle. But we are not here to trade ship for ship." He gestured to the tactical display, where hundreds of Orsish vessels moved in perfect formation through the void. "How goes the construction of the Hellforged platforms?" "The final components are being assembled now. The bioships have successfully cultivated the neural networks needed to interface with human technology. Once we capture the solar stations, the Hellforge will be able to process their energy output directly." The Hellforge was the Orcs' greatest innovation, a living weapons platform that could adapt to any energy source and convert it into devastating firepower. Unlike humanity's rigid technological approach, Orsish science embraced organic solutions. Their ships were grown in vast biovats, their computers were neural networks cultured from modified brain tissue, and their weapons evolved with each battle. "The human Admiral Chen," Thok mused. "What do our spies tell us about her?" "She is formidable. Veterans of the border wars speak of her tactical brilliance. She has never lost a fleet engagement." Gorka paused. "But she has never faced the full might of the United Clans." Thok's laugh was like grinding metal. "The humans harvested the sun's energy for 200 years, growing fat and lazy on easy power. They forgot that true strength comes from struggle, from the cold void between stars. Today they learn that lesson." The Orsish fleet was a sight to inspire both awe and terror. Where human ships were sleek and geometric, Orsish vessels were organic curves and flowing lines. They looked less like spacecraft and more like the skeletons of deep-sea leviathans, their hulls pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that served as both communication and intimidation. "War Chief," the ship's living computer announced in its eerie, whispering voice, "we are receiving a transmission from the human fleet. They demand we withdraw from the inner system." "Put it through," Thok commanded. Admiral Chen's image appeared on the organic viewing screen, her uniform crisp and her expression stern. "War Chief Thok Ironjaw. I am Admiral Zara Chen of the Solar Defense Fleet. You are in violation of the Treaty of Vesta. Withdraw your forces immediately or face the consequences." Thok stood to his full 8-foot height, his massive frame imposing even in the low gravity of the bridge. "Admiral Chen, I have heard tales of your reputation. But treaties are for species that share common ground. We Orcs were born in the cold void. We do not recognize your claim to the star that warms your worlds. The solar energy harvesting stations were built by human hands and human ingenuity. They belong to humanity. And the sun belongs to no one," Thok replied. "Its light falls equally on all worlds, human and orc alike. For too long, your species has hoarded its power while others freeze in the outer darkness. That ends today." Chen's expression hardened. Then you choose war. War was chosen long ago, Admiral, when your kind decided that one species should control the lifeblood of the solar system. We merely come to collect what is ours by right. Thok leaned forward, his tusks gleaming in the bridge's bioluminescent light. But I offer you this: surrender the solar stations peacefully, and your fleets may withdraw with honor. Resist, and we will take them over your burning wrecks. You underestimate both human resolve and human technology, War Chief. We have weapons you cannot imagine. And we have weapons you have never seen. Thok's grin was predatory. In 18 standard hours, my fleets will be in range of your precious stations. Make your choice, Admiral. Honor or ash. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in contemplative silence. Gorka stepped closer to his commander. Do you think she will surrender? Humans do not surrender, Thok replied. It is both their greatest strength and their fatal weakness. They will fight for every station, every ship, every drop of solar energy. Which makes their eventual defeat all the more satisfying. And if their secret weapons proved more dangerous than anticipated? Thok's eyes gleamed with anticipation. Then we will adapt. We always do. The humans built their civilization on harnessing a star's power. But we Orcs learned to thrive in the void between stars. When their sun fails them, they will have nothing. When the void fails us, we become stronger. The battle began at 0347 hours, Solar Standard Time, when the first wave of Orcish vessels entered the engagement envelope of humanity's outer defensive perimeter. Admiral Chen watched from the command center of Prometheus Station as her tactical display lit up with hundreds of enemy contacts. First contact with hostile forces, Commander Hayes reported. The Victorious and her escort group are engaging the advanced scouts. The human fleet was a masterpiece of engineering precision. Each ship was a geometric work of art, its hull gleaming with energy-resistant alloys and bristling with weapons powered by concentrated solar energy. The flagship Victorious led a formation of 12 heavy cruisers, their particle beam arrays charging with stored stellar power. But as the engagement commenced, it became clear that this would be unlike any previous conflict between the two species. Admiral, the sensor officer called out in alarm. The Orcs' ships are not responding to our weapons' fire as expected. The energy beams are being absorbed. Chen watched in growing concern as humanity's most powerful weapons struck the organic hulls of the Orcish vessels and seemed to disappear into them without effect. The bioships pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, and Chen realized with horror that they were actually feeding on the energy attacks. They've adapted, she breathed. Their ships are biological energy converters. Our own weapons are powering them. The tide of battle turned quickly. Orcish vessels that should have been disabled by the first volleys instead accelerated toward the human fleet, their bioweapons now supercharged with converted human energy. Living projectiles that ride through space like serpents struck human ships, boring through their hulls with acidic secretions. Victorious is taking heavy damage, Hayes reported. They're requesting permission to withdraw. Granted. All units fall back to the secondary defensive line. Switch to kinetic weapons only, no energy-based attacks. Chen's mind raced through tactical options. If the Orcs could convert energy weapons into fuel, humanity's primary advantage was neutralized. But the Orcs were not content with simply repelling the human fleet. As the Victorious limped away from the engagement zone, massive Orcish bioships moved toward the outer solar harvesting stations. These installations, designated as Solar Collection Platforms 7 through 12, were the furthest from the Sun and therefore the most vulnerable. They're targeting SCP-9, the tactical officer reported. Deploying some kind of boarding organisms? The main display showed an image that would haunt Chen's dreams for years to come. The Orcish ships were releasing clouds of what looked like spores or seeds into space. But as they approached the human stations, the objects revealed themselves to be something far more sinister, living creatures the size of shuttlecraft, with multiple grasping appendages and what appeared to be cutting tools integrated into their biology. They're parasites, Chen realized. They're going to infect our stations. The boarding organisms attached themselves to SCP-9's hull and began secreting acid that ate through the station's armor plating. Within minutes, they had penetrated the outer sections and were moving through the corridors like living nightmares. The station's crew fought desperately, but their energy weapons were useless against creatures that fed on power. "Emergency evacuation of SCP-9 is underway," Hayes reported. "But we're losing personnel. The boarding organisms are reproducing inside the station." Chin closed her eyes for a moment, steeling herself for what had to be done. "Activate the Heliarch targeting array. Focus on SCP-9. Admiral, our own people are still aboard." "I know." Chen's voice was steady, but her hands trembled as she entered her authorization codes. "But if we allow the Orcs to convert that station into a breeding ground, we'll lose everything." The Heliarch weapon was a marvel of human engineering and a testament to their mastery of solar energy. Hidden in a shielded chamber at the heart of Prometheus Station, it was essentially a miniature replica of the Sun's core, capable of generating and focusing stellar-level energy into a coherent beam. The weapon charged for 30 seconds, an eternity in space combat. During that time, more Orcish boarding organisms attached themselves to SCP-9, and the station's distress calls grew more desperate. Then, with no visible flash or explosion, an invisible beam of concentrated solar energy struck the compromised station. SCP-9 simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, a kilometer-long structure housing 3,000 human personnel and countless Orcish parasites. The next moment, there was only empty space and a rapidly expanding cloud of elemental particles. "Station destroyed," the weapons officer reported quietly. "All hands lost." Chin felt the weight of those deaths, but she could not afford to grieve. "Not yet. Target the Orcish bioships. Full Heliarch barrage." But the Orcs had been watching and learning. As the next Heliarch beam lanced out toward their fleet, the bioships scattered in seemingly random directions. Chin realized they weren't random at all. The vessels were moving in response to some kind of hive intelligence, predicting the targeting patterns faster than human computers could calculate them. "Impossible," Hayes breathed. "They're anticipating our firing solutions before we even lock on." "Not impossible," Chin said grimly. "Adaptive. War Chief Thok warned us they had weapons we'd never seen. I think we're looking at biological quantum computing, neural networks that can process multiple probability scenarios simultaneously." The first phase of the battle had lasted only 3 hours, but the strategic implications were clear. Humanity's technological superiority meant nothing against an enemy that could adapt to and counter their advantages in real time. Worse, the Orcs had demonstrated the ability to convert human technology for their own use. "All stations prepare for siege protocols," Chin ordered. "We're dealing with an enemy that learns from every engagement. From now on, we assume they can counter any tactic within minutes of its first use." As if to underscore her point, the tactical display showed Orcish ships beginning to cluster around the remains of SCP-9. They were actually harvesting the dispersed matter, feeding it into their bioreactors to create new vessels and weapons from the destroyed human station. The solar war had begun, and humanity was already losing. 3 days after the first engagement, Admiral Chin stood in the secure conference room aboard Prometheus Station, surrounded by holographic projections of humanity's top military commanders. The faces around the virtual table represented the combined strategic wisdom of the species, but their expressions ranged from concerned to openly pessimistic. "The situation is deteriorating faster than our worst-case projections," reported General Saravas from Mars Command. "The Orcs have taken 7 outer system harvesting stations. They're not just capturing them, they're transforming them into something else entirely." The main display showed surveillance footage from the captured stations. What had once been geometric human architecture was now covered in organic growths that pulsed with their own internal light. The stations had become hybrid creatures, part technology and part biology, processing solar energy in ways that human science couldn't comprehend. "They're not just stealing our power," observed Dr. Elena Vasquez, the chief scientist of the Solar Engineering Corps. "They're improving our designs. The energy output from the converted stations has increased by 40%. They're doing something to the quantum resonance collectors that we never thought possible. Admiral Chen studied the data with growing unease. They're not just adapting to our technology. They're evolving it. She turned to the intelligence briefing. What do we know about their strategic objectives? Commander Hayes activated another display. Based on fleet movements and communications intercepts, we believe they're implementing what we're calling the ring strategy. They're not trying to capture all the solar stations at once. Instead, they're taking control of strategic positions to create a blockade. The display showed the Orcish fleet positions overlaid on the solar system map. Chin could see the pattern immediately. The Orcs were positioning themselves to control the shipping lanes between the Sun and the outer planets. If successful, they would effectively cut off energy supplies to the human colonies beyond Mars. Estimated time until the blockade is complete? Chen asked. 14 days, Hayes replied. After that, no human vessel will be able to reach the outer system without running an Orcish gauntlet. Admiral Torres from the Europa Defense Force leaned forward in his holographic projection. Admiral Chen, with respect, conventional tactics aren't working. We've lost 17 ships in the past 3 days, and the Orcs are getting stronger with every engagement. Maybe it's time to consider alternatives. Chen knew what he meant without him saying it directly. The extermination protocols, weapons so devastating that their use had been banned by every human government since their development 3 centuries ago. Nuclear weaponry enhanced with solar energy, capable of sterilizing entire moons. Absolutely not, Chen said firmly. We don't destroy worlds to save them. There has to be another way. What about the deep platforms? Suggested Dr. Vasquez quietly. The room fell silent. The deep platforms were humanity's most classified project, experimental solar collectors positioned impossibly close to the Sun's surface, operating in conditions that would vaporize any normal matter. They were rumored to be capable of harvesting energy directly from solar fusion reactions, but their existence was neither confirmed nor denied by any official source. The deep platforms don't exist, Chen said carefully, but her expression conveyed a different message to those who knew how to read between the lines. Of course they don't, Dr. Vasquez replied with equal care. But if they did exist, and if they were capable of the energy outputs that theoretical models suggest, they might represent our only advantage that the Orcs couldn't immediately adapt to. General Voss frowned. Assuming these theoretical platforms existed, what would be the risks of activating them? Catastrophic failure could trigger solar instabilities, Dr. Vasquez explained. We're talking about technology that interfaces with fusion reactions at the stellar core level. One miscalculation could cause solar flares that would sterilize the inner planets. And if we don't use them, Admiral Torres pointed out, the Orcs will eventually capture enough stations to achieve energy parity with us. At that point, their biological advantages make them nearly unbeatable. Chen weighed the options. The deep platforms did exist. She was one of only 7 humans who knew their true location and capabilities. But Dr. Vasquez was right about the risks. The platforms operated by extending quantum tendrils directly into the Sun's fusion core, extracting energy at levels that made the regular harvesting stations look like candles compared to searchlights. I need recommendations on our immediate tactical response, Chen said, deflecting the question of the deep platforms for now. The Orcs will reach the middle system stations within 6 days. How do we stop them without giving them more technology to adapt? Kinetic weapons, suggested General Voss. Old-fashioned projectiles moving at relativistic speeds. Hard to adapt to physics. They've already shown they can dodge our targeting systems, Hayes pointed out. Their bioships seem to have some kind of precognitive ability. Then we don't give them targets to dodge, Chen said slowly, an idea forming. We make the space itself hostile. She activated the strategic display and began sketching out a plan that was either brilliant or suicidal, possibly both. The Orcs are using gravity wells to accelerate their approach. Jupiter, Saturn, the inner planets. What if we mined those gravity wells? Admiral, Dr. Vasquez said slowly, The energy requirements for that kind of operation would be enormous. We'd have to position thousands of kinetic mines in precise orbits around multiple planets, and keep them there despite gravitational perturbations. The solar stations have been generating excess power for months, Chen replied. We've been stockpiling energy cells because we had nowhere to use them. Now we do. The plan took shape as they discussed it. Rather than trying to fight the Orcs fleets directly, they would turn the solar system itself into a weapon. Kinetic mines powered by concentrated solar energy, positioned at key gravitational nexuses. The Orcs' own strategy of using gravity assists would become their downfall. It's audacious, admitted Admiral Torres. And completely insane. But it might work. Begin deployment immediately, Chen ordered. We have 6 days to turn the inner system into a minefield. And prepare the evacuation protocols for all non-essential personnel. Evacuation protocols? General Voss looked puzzled. Chen's expression was grim. Because if this doesn't work, I'm activating the deep platforms. And if I do that, everyone in the inner system has approximately 4 minutes to reach minimum safe distance before the sun becomes very, very angry. War Chief Thok Ironjaw stood in the bioneural command chamber of his flagship, watching with satisfaction as his forces consolidated their control over the outer solar harvesting stations. The hybrid stations were already showing remarkable improvements, their living components optimizing energy collection in ways that exceeded even his expectations. The human admiral proves more cunning than anticipated, reported Gorka Bloodspear, his chief tactical advisor. They've withdrawn all their fleets to defensive positions around the middle system stations. But our intelligence suggests they're preparing something. Thok examined the tactical display, where points of light showed the positions of both fleets across the solar system. The humans had pulled back into a tight defensive formation, which was either a sign of desperation or the preparation for some new strategy. What are our bioscouts reporting from the human positions? He asked. Unusual energy signatures. Massive power transfers between stations. And they've been launching thousands of small objects into seemingly random trajectories. Gorka paused. The launch vectors don't correspond to any known human weapons or defensive systems. Show me. The display expanded to show the human launch activities over the past several days. Thousands of small objects had been deployed throughout the inner system, their trajectories carefully calculated to intersect with the gravitational fields of the major planets. Thok's eyes narrowed as he studied the pattern. The humans were seeding the space lanes with something, but what? The objects were too small to be weapons platforms, too numerous to be sensor arrays. Mines, he realized suddenly. They're mining the gravity wells. Impossible, Gorka objected. The energy requirements alone would bankrupt their power reserves. They'd have to sacrifice the output of dozens of stations just to. He stopped, understanding dawning on his scarred features. They're using the harvested solar energy as kinetic accelerators. Clever, Thok admitted grudgingly. They cannot match our biological adaptivity, so they turn physics itself into their weapon. Each mine accelerated by concentrated stellar energy, the kinetic impact would be equivalent to antimatter explosions. The implications were troubling. The Orcs' strategy relied on using gravitational mechanics to accelerate their bioships to incredible velocities. If the humans had successfully mined those same gravitational fields, any Orcish vessel attempting to use gravity assists would fly directly into a wall of relativistic projectiles. Orders, War Chief? Gorka asked. Thok considered his options. The humans had effectively made the inner system impassable through conventional means. But the Orcs had not survived the void between stars by accepting conventional limitations. Activate the deep hunger protocols, he commanded. Even Gorka, veteran of a dozen campaigns, looked shocked. War Chief, the deep hunger has never been tested on this scale. The bioships required for that kind of operation will be grown, Thok finished. The humans think they can deny us passage through space by seeding it with kinetic mines. But space is not empty, Gorka. It teems with life, quantum foam, virtual particles, dark matter itself. We will show them what happens when the void itself becomes hungry. The deep hunger was the Orcs' most closely guarded secret, developed during their long journey between the stars. It was based on a simple but terrifying principle. If you could create biological entities that fed on the fundamental forces of space itself, they could survive and thrive in any environment, even the apparent vacuum between worlds. Begin the cultivation immediately, Thok ordered. We'll need bioships capable of feeding on kinetic energy, gravitational fields, and quantum fluctuations. The humans want to turn physics into their weapon? We'll eat their physics. Over the next several hours, the Orcish bioforges worked at a pace that defied comprehension. The ships didn't manufacture their bioweapons, they grew them, using genetic templates that had been refined over centuries of void survival. The new creatures were unlike anything that had existed before, living entities that existed partially in normal space and partially in the quantum foam that underlied reality itself. The first deep hunger entities are ready for deployment, reported the Bioforge Overseer, an ancient orc whose skin had been replaced with living metal that interfaced directly with the organic technology. They show full integration with quantum field fluctuations. They should be able to consume the kinetic energy of the human minds while feeding. Thok watched through bioneural links as the creatures were released into space. They were barely visible even to Orcish sensors, translucent, constantly shifting forms that seemed to bend light around themselves. But their hunger was real and immediate. The first test came when one of the entities encountered a human kinetic mine. The mine's sensors detected an incoming object and activated, accelerating to 90% of light speed in a fraction of a second. The projectile should have annihilated anything in its path. Instead, the deep hunger entity opened what could only be described as a mouth in space itself. The kinetic projectile disappeared into the creature, its energy absorbed and converted into biological mass. The entity grew larger and began dividing, creating more of its kind. Magnificent, Thok breathed. Deploy the full swarm. Let them clear a path through the human minefield. But as the entities spread through the inner system, feeding on kinetic mines and growing exponentially, something unexpected happened. The creatures began to detect a far more appetizing energy source than the relatively small human weapons. War Chief, Gorka reported with growing alarm. The deep hunger entities are changing course. They're no longer targeting just the mines. They're moving toward the sun itself. Thok felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold of space. The deep hunger entities had been designed to survive in the void by feeding on any available energy. But the sun represented more energy than they had ever encountered, orders of magnitude more than the scattered mines of the human minefield. Recall them immediately, he commanded. We can't, Gorka replied. They've evolved beyond our control signals. They're operating on pure biological imperative now. Seek the strongest energy source and consume it. On the tactical display, hundreds of deep hunger entities were streaming toward the sun, growing larger with each human mind they consumed. They had become a feeding frenzy of cosmic proportions, and they were headed directly for the star that powered all life in the solar system. Get me Admiral Chen, Thok commanded grimly. Now.